Parents, tell me if this sounds familiar. Your child is melting down at birthday parties while all the other kids are having fun. Or the tags on their clothing send them into a spiral. The sound of the vacuum cleaner probably sounds like a fire alarm to them. So many of the parents that we meet are walking on eggshells just hoping to prevent the next sensory explosion. Maybe you've been told it's just a phase or they'll eventually grow out of it, but some days you're wondering if you're doing something wrong, if you're being too accommodating, or if the other parents think that you're just making excuses for your kid's bad behavior. Here's what nobody is talking about. Your child's nervous system is experiencing the world completely different from other kids. It's not behavioral, it's not a parenting problem, and it's definitely not something that they are doing on purpose. So listen to me when I tell you this. Your child is not giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time. Today, I want to explain exactly what's happening inside your child's body when they experience this sensory overload. I want to talk about why the traditional approaches often plateau and you still feel stuck. And most importantly, what can you do to finally help your child's nervous system find balance? Let's talk about this sensory processing label, this SPD, sensory processing disorder. It's frequently connected to different labels such as autism, maybe ADHD, or really just a kid who is having behavioral, emotional regulation struggles. The sensory input side of it is at the root of so much else. And I think one of our patients, one of their stories really shows and explains this well. Jody, she came to one of our recent perfect storms for her son, Jackson. He was struggling with some big regulation challenges, some big sensory input issues. He's only been here for less than 2 months at this point and has been doing amazing. And one of the things that just happened this weekend, she sent us a message and said, hey, he was at a birthday party. Typically that would be an environment where he couldn't handle it at all, whether it's his own or somebody else's, especially singing happy birthday. He would be gone and wouldn't be able to process it at all. But he was there and he stayed in the room. He didn't have to cover his ears. Dad didn't have to hold him and squeeze him tight. In the words that she said to us, she said, thank you so much for giving him a shot at a normal childhood. And that just melts our hearts because that is exactly what every kid deserves, right? That's our vision at Thrive. It's every kid, every family reaching their full potential. And I think her experience there shows really why the sensory side of it is at the root of everything else. So let's get into it. What she learned, what Jody learned at that Perfect Storm workshop is that the nervous system is the air traffic control center of everything else, right? And think of an air traffic controller at an airport. If they are being overwhelmed with sensory input, you're not going to be able to do that job well, right? If there are 5 times the number of planes coming in, and if that room, the environment they're in, has half as many staff working there, and they've got music blaring as loud as possible, it's probably not going to be real conducive to success. But that's what's going on internally for so many of these kids. Our nervous system, or really our sensory system, has 7 senses. We usually talk about 5, right? Visual, auditory, taste, smell, tactile, but there's 2 other very important ones. There's vestibular, which is our sense of balance, and then the most important one, which really doesn't get discussed much at all, is proprioception. Proprioception is your body's self-awareness. It's your ability to have a sense of where you are in space without physically touching or moving. It's like you can close your eyes and touch your elbow, or at least you should be able to, right? Maybe your sensory system needs some love if you can't do those sort of tasks. But that proprioceptive input, that is crucial for brain development. That's why motor movement and motor milestones are so important for kids, right? That's why something like crawling is really a huge benchmark in that first year of life, because it is a indicator of how well their neuromotor system is developing. It's a sign of what's going on neurologically within their brain. So when we have that proprioceptive sensory input that's off, we can have it one of 2 ways. We can have hypersensitivity, which is too much, right? Everything is irritating. That's where the clothes, the tags, the noises are too much input. And that's where and then the other side of that, we could have hyposensitivity, and that's too little. That's when you have sensory seeking behavior, right? A kid is banging their head against stuff, or they really love those tight squeezes, tight inputs. Most kids have both, right? Most kids, it's not one or the other. It's a complete dysregulation, and they need to find themselves in the middle, right? And so when we have this complete mismatch of input, the reality of what's going on around them isn't matching how their body is perceiving it, right? There's one data input coming in, but the way it's processed, the way it's taken in, and then the output is nothing close to that. That is why the nervous system is at the root of it. And really your central nervous system, which is where your spine and specifically that upper neck brainstem area, that is so crucial for this brain input in this proprioceptive feedback. because the way your body prioritizes its awareness in space, the core, our torso here, is at the center of it. This sensory input comes from everything, right? All over your skin, all over the ligaments and muscles and tendons. That input's coming from everywhere, but the majority happens from this core. It's your neurospinal system. It's all of the different joints and motor units of our spine. But then even more intense or more in depth, we get to this very top, your occiput, the base of your skull, C1, C2. This little area has the overwhelming majority of that proprioceptive input. And that's needed, right? Your brain needs to know where is your head in relation to space, right? How are your eyes in relation to the horizon? To be able to walk on 2 feet, there is some really complex brain stuff going on. So that sensory input is so important, but that's also how we have the recipe of where it can go south. When does this get messed up? These sensory input challenges can be screwed up from this process that we call the perfect storm. The perfect storm can happen really early in life, parents. We see it really starting in pregnancy for a lot of families, but maybe it's prenatal stress, maybe it's birth trauma, birth interventions, and then you got a baby dealing with colic or constipation or reflux or early antibiotic exposure or other toxins. These series of stresses show up in a kid's life early on especially and get locked in. That creates a stress response. The fancy word for that is called the sympathetic nervous system. Think of your sympathetic nervous system as your fight or flight. That is your survival mechanism. It's okay if you're truly running from a bear in the woods and you need to survive. The problem is when we get stuck in stress, when that's not the case. When you're just going through baby life, when you're just in a calm classroom. We can't have that fight or flight mode turned on. Otherwise, all of the input we're feeling and we're perceiving around us is not going to be able to be interpreted properly. So there's so many factors that can go into that. There's so many different case history indicators or physical traumas or toxic exposures that we dig into when we're working with a family. But that's the simple and short version of it. Is there's too much stress in some forms of that stress, right? You think of stress as an adult, you think of like, oh, I got bills to pay, or I have some, weird PTO thing going on. No, it's physical, chemical, emotional challenges in that child's life, especially ones that show up early on. It leads to this fight or flight mode taking place. The birth process is one we talk a ton about because nobody else is realizing how important that is, especially when you have either forceps or vacuum extraction, maybe a prolonged birth, a C-section delivery. This upper neck area is the one that's going to be most damaged because you're pulling kids out by their head and neck. Where did we just talk about has the most input? It's right up top here. So when this is jacked up, it's the most important thing that's going to set that sensory input into an overdrive system that's not able to interpret or make sense of it. And that's also, guys, why the traditional therapies can be helpful, and they are so valuable, right? We're not opposed to OT or speech or PT or those things at all. They are just more helpful when done in the right sequence. When you have this fight or flight nervous system or this system locked in stress and you're trying to add those therapies on it, it's like you're trying to remodel a house that the foundation is crumbling, or you're trying to push a car and drive it forward, but your parking brake is still locked in. You're going to have a hard time making progress, right? You're going to have a hard time really getting to where you need to be. And that's the feedback we get from parents is it's not that the therapies are unhelpful. They'll make a big leap forward, or they'll have a big jump up, but then it plateaus and they get stuck, and we're missing that healing from the inside out. After you unlock that healing potential, you get them out of fight or flight, you very well might need more therapies and input and sensory regulation from the OT or from those other sort of providers, but you got to go in the right sequence to get the most out of it for kids. So parents, take this summary here as your child is not broken, they're stuck, right? Like we said earlier, they're not giving you a hard time, they are having a hard time. I want you to remind yourself of that. I want you, moms and dads, to pause, take an extra breath, because you probably need it. If you've got a kid that's dealing with these sensory stimulation and overdrive kids, you are on your last rope too, right? You are hanging on by a thread because you're exhausted and you're drained trying to keep up with them, trying to give them everything that they need to make sure that they are thriving. So let us help. Let us be a part of that, right? We've got to address the cause. We got to calm that sensory input, correct that misfiring proprioceptive feedback loop so that then they can take in information from the world around them without it creating the stress response, and then everything else will follow suit from that. That's why the scans that we do at Thrive are so key, because it lets us measure this. It lets us quantify and objectively track how is their nervous system handling life. what's going on. Are they already at a 10 out of 10 of stress level, or are they somewhere in between, right? And so that's why step one is always doing those scans, is getting an objective look into what's going on with the nervous system, so that then we can put together a game plan specific to that kid and their case history and their story to get them headed in a better direction. Let us be a part of that journey. If that makes sense to you at all, please reach out to the team. We'd love to help. We'd love to learn more about what's going on with you and how we can help your family thrive.